from Dallas, Texas, the flash, apparently official, President Kennedy died at 1 p.m. Central Standard Time.
I checked in with my children, and who are deeply distressed.
I'm Chevy Chase, and you're not.
Jane, you ignorant slut.
Cassius was right. The fault, dear Brutus, is not in our stars, but in ourselves. Good night, and good luck.
The recent film, The Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It, is another in a long line of movies that bills itself as, quote, based on a true story. Many of the films in the Conjuring universe also bear that banner, but how close to the facts of the story is Warner Brothers' latest release? I'm Redcranke with Death Curse Society. Let's dive into a brand new Redcranke Report and find out.
Lorraine, you need to come back.
In The Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It, paranormal investigators Ed and Lorraine Warren take on one of the most sensational cases of their careers after a cop stumbles upon a dazed and bloodied young man walking down the road.
I think I hurt someone.
Accused of murder, the suspect claims demonic possession as his defense, forcing the Warrens into a supernatural inquiry unlike anything they've ever seen before. The movie focuses on the true story of Arnie Cheyenne Johnson, who, on February 16, 1981, murdered businessman Alan Bono, who was also his fiancée's boss and landlord. The killing is the first recorded murder in the small town of Brookfield, Connecticut. Arnie and his attorney, Martin Manella, tried to argue that Arnie was not guilty by reason of demonic possession. The judge presiding over the case, Robert Callahan, shot down their proposed defense, stating that, quote, no such defense could ever exist in a court of law due to lack of evidence, and that it would be irrelative and unscientific to allow related testimony, end quote. Because of this, Manella was forced to offer a self-defense explanation for the murder, which was dismissed by the jury, who convicted Arnie of first-degree manslaughter on November 24, 1981. Arnie served less than 5 years of a 10 to 20-year sentence. While in prison, he married Debbie Glatzel, who, according to director Michael Chavez, recently passed away due to cancer. Arnie Johnson has remained out of the public spotlight since his release from prison, except for a rare on-camera interview about his possession for Discovery Channel's A Haunting in 2006.
I seen the fear in this child is just overwhelming. Something was going wrong. And I believed him.
Those are the facts from the case, most of which are discussed in the movie, but many of the film's elements past the murder are concocted solely for the purposes of fictionalizing what could be a harrowing tale all on its own. The film begins with Debbie Glatzel and Arnie Johnson moving into a new house in 1981. They are accompanied by 8-year-old David Glatzel, Debbie's brother, who discovers a waterbed in the house and decides to play on it. After jumping around for a bit, he lays on the bed until it moves on its own. He recoils, only to be grabbed by a ghostly arm which explodes from inside the bed. In the original tale, as told by the Warrens and the 1983 book by Gerald Brittle, The Devil in Connecticut, David first began exhibiting signs of possession in 1980, claiming that he saw the vision of an old man with a torn plaid shirt who pushed him. He later referred to this entity as the Beast, claiming that this was his name. The Beast would appear and speak to him frequently, even following David home with Arnie and Debbie and threatening harm if the couple moved into the new home. As David's possession would intensify, he would continue to mention the Beast, who sometimes spoke in Latin, threatening to steal his soul. David would continue exhibiting strange behavior, experiencing night terrors while mysterious scratches and bruises would appear on his body. One account even detailed the boy being struck and choked by an invisible entity while the family watched. 12 days after the original incident, Ed and Lorraine Warren are called in to assess and assist. David had begun quoting scripture and passages from Paradise Lost, as well as growling, hissing, and speaking in otherworldly voices. Upon arriving, Lorraine notices a black mist hovering near David, a point which is not referenced in the recent film, but signified to Lorraine that a negative presence was attached to David. Ed Warren contends that at least 43 demons had identified themselves to him during their investigation, but only one is mentioned in the film. After interviewing the family and witnessing some minor paranormal occurrences, the Warrens recommend a light exorcism, which they supervise. Although the film only portrays one rite, at least 3 light exorcisms were conducted over the summer and fall of 1980. During these exorcisms, Lorraine claims that David levitated, stopped breathing for a brief time, and even predicted the tragedy that Arnie would commit early next year. After a premonition of her own, Lorraine called the Brookfield Police Department in October of 1980 to warn them that the situation with the Glatzel family was becoming dangerous. As portrayed in the film, during one of the exorcisms, Arnie had seen enough pain and suffering being inflicted on David and, against the advice of Ed, demanded the demon enter him instead.
Look at me! Just leave him alone, okay? Leave him alone and take me. Please, okay? Leave him alone and take me!
Reminiscent of a scene from the 1973 blockbuster film The Exorcist.
Take me! Come into me! God damn you! Take me! Take me!
Although the film portrays this as the end of David's troubles and the beginning of Arnie's, David continued to experience signs of demonic possession. This would seem to indicate that only one demon infested Arnie, leaving 42 to reside within David. There is also no account that Ed witnessed the demon switching from David to Arnie. This was another fictional construct for the film, which also included Ed's heart attack and subsequent hospital stay. What is left out of the recent film are a couple of occurrences Arnie claims happened to him after coercing the demon to possess him instead, including his car losing control and crashing into a tree.
The car engine just started to race. A dark figure appears out of nowhere. And an arm lifted up and pointed to the tree. All of a sudden the vehicle just took off. Didn't have no control.
And making eye contact with the beast while investigating an old well on the rental property they originally planned to move into.
I saw the black figure, drew me in.
Arnie remembers that as his final lucid memory of the demon, and the Warrens felt at this time Arnie was likely fully possessed. Around this time, Debbie had found employment at a local kennel and dog grooming service owned by Alan Bono, renamed Bruno Sauls in the film, likely to avoid paying Bono's family for the rights to his name. As part of her compensation, Alan offered her an adjoining apartment for her and Arnie to live in as long as she worked for him. It was after moving in that Arnie would begin exhibiting more disturbing behavior that was strikingly similar to David's at the beginning of his possession, such as falling into a trance-like state, hallucinating, and growling like a dog. During one overly intense moment, Debbie felt threatened by Arnie and slapped him at least twice to snap him out of his daze. Arnie would have no recollection of these events after they happened. We then come to the events of February 16th, 1981. Arnie called in sick for his job at a local tree trimming service and joined Debbie at the kennel. The film portrays that Debbie and Arnie were alone with Alan, but actual testimony differs, stating that Arnie's sister Wanda and Debbie's 9-year-old cousin Mary were also there. Alan offered to take the whole crew to lunch and began drinking heavily, so much so that the waitress had to cut him off. During his autopsy, Alan's blood alcohol concentration was recorded at .341, more than 4 times the legal limit of being considered intoxicated. Once they returned to the kennel, Alan was clearly drunk at this point and became agitated. For some reason, Alan seized 9-year-old Mary and refused to let her go. Arnie returned to help after hearing the struggle and freed Mary, who ran to the car. Wanda watched as the 2 men began to fight while Debbie attempted to get between the men. Alan began growling like an animal and pulled a 5-inch pocket knife, stabbing Alan repeatedly. In the movie, they make reference to 22 stab wounds, which was mirrored by the death of Katie Lincoln at the hand of her friend Jessica, who went missing in Danvers, Massachusetts. The storyline of the two girls is another fictional construct of the film to support their link to the disciples of the Ram, but there are no actual facts to support any links to a cult in the actual story. According to the police report of the murder, Alan died several hours later suffering from, quote, 4 or 5 tremendous wounds to his chest and torso, one that stretched from his stomach to his heart. Arnie fled the scene immediately afterwards and was located 2 miles away by officers. He was officially charged with murder the next day, February 17th, 1981. One of the most controversial aspects of the Devil Made Me Do It case was, ironically, the involvement of the Warrens themselves. Although in recent years, thanks mostly to the Conjuring films and the series of books written about their cases, the Warrens are mostly applauded as folk heroes, in a sense. During their active investigative years of the 70s and 80s, that wasn't normally the case. Many skeptics tried to expose the Warrens as frauds in interviews, newspaper articles, and other outlets. Many times, the Warrens would be confronted on live TV interviews by skeptics who would try to disprove their allegations. In response to the reaction and confrontations they experienced during televised interviews, the Warrens began producing their own talk show where they would discuss their cases free of skepticism. These shows were often hosted by their son-in-law, Tony Spera, Judy's husband. In the Devil Made Me Do It case, Arnie Johnson and Debbie Glatzel have been the only two who have completely and consistently supported the Warrens' account of their story. When The Devil in Connecticut was republished in 2006, David's brother Carl Glatzel Jr. filed a lawsuit against Gerald Brittle and Lorraine Warren for unspecified damages, claiming the book was a work of complete fiction and that his brother suffered from mental illness as a child that led to hallucinations and delusions. But he has since recovered and wants to leave this story in the past. Carl further contends that the Warrens exploited David and his family for monetary gain, although Gerald says the family was compensated by the book's publisher. Carl claims his family only received $2,000 from the publisher, but the Warrens would become famous from the worldwide attention the case brought to them. Carl Glatzel Sr. has also refuted the claims in the book, denying he told the author his son was possessed. Gerald defends his work, saying he has hours of recordings of the family recounting their story, including David's parents. David himself has refused to comment on multiple inquiries, attempting to move on with his life. So, are the Warrens true demonologists or elaborate frauds? That is up to you to decide. The Warrens reportedly never took any money from the individuals or families they helped, choosing only to make a profit by writing books, interviews, presentations, and other public appearances. It seems that if you already believe in ghosts, demons, and other paranormal activity, you are more likely to believe in the Warrens. If you don't have those beliefs, then you probably consider them frauds. It's a question that can likely never be answered. I hope you enjoyed this edition of the Redcranke Report. Make sure to subscribe and follow us on social media: Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Twitch, and YouTube, of course. What other famous, based on true story horror movies should we dissect in the future? Let us know in the comments, and stay tuned for more Death Curse Society. Woo! Woo! Hey, thanks guys for watching Death Curse Society. This is Redcranke here. If you enjoyed what you saw, make sure to go up here, hit that subscription button. Make sure to hit that bell too so you get a notification whenever we drop some new videos. And speaking of different videos, bam! Right over here we got a couple for you to check out as well. Check these out. Keep watching Death Curse Society. Thanks for tuning in. Woo!